Allow me to introduce to you Kees Kruythoff. He's the chairman and CEO of the LiveKindly collective. He left Unilever in 2019 after 27 years as one of the leading people there. He is passionate about using the private sector as a force for good, and he is on a mission to make plant-based living the new norm. Also welcome Sophie Kevany. She's a journalist writing about animal welfare, agriculture, climate impact of animal products and animal rights for The Guardian and other international media. Sophie will interview Kees and host a Q&A session afterwards. And before I give the floor to them, we show you a short video of LiveKindly, and after that, the interview will start.
Kees, good afternoon again. You've been introduced. I'm just going to go over it briefly again. You were with Unilever, one of the largest fast-moving consumer goods companies in the world, for 27 years, and you moved to found the LiveKindly collective. I don't know where you want to start, but you could either start with what you did with Unilever or what you're doing now. But my first question, I think, would be, what is life going to be like in a plant-based world? Because I think that's where you're headed.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's absolutely great to be here at this event and even physically be here together. Let me start with 27 years of Unilever, because you know, what that did for me was getting the opportunity to work, live, and experience all in all the different continents around the world, what the food system is all about. And I think is that, you know, with that understanding, you have also the ability to include and transcend systems into a next phase. And, you know, let's start with the fact is that the thing that I learned most as part of the Unilever journey was that we created something which was called the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. And that was really to use the company as a force for good, and that therefore you can choose as a company to make a positive impact. For Unilever, that is 2.5 billion consumers every day. And through our brands and our systems, we really try to optimize that. Having said that, what we have also recognized is that actually, you know, the current food system is completely broken.
What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. And what it means is that, and I think is that the previous two people were talking about it as well. You know, in the 1950s, when there was the old food system for 3.5 to 3 billion people, at least, you know, it could handle in our current, with our current construct of the planet. Of course, you know, already then it's not a good idea to eat animals, but at least, you know, the total demand of food versus the supply of food at least was able to do that in balance with nature. Now with 7.7 billion people, there is just no way that we can continue to do that. So the first point is 91% of the Amazon deforestation comes out of the animal-based food system. And so all these elements come out of the sheer size and scale which is required because of the number of people and indeed, you know, the middle class increasing. Just think about what has happened in China by itself. And so what our, therefore, mission is to make plant-based living the new norm. And
So are you talking about something, for example, you just mentioned the Amazon there, so deforestation on a huge scale to grow the plants to feed the animals that we eat.
yeah, exactly.
What's your plan?
The plan is that you don't do that in an indirect step, but you basically take the plant, and with the plant, you can actually feed the world. And it's
Skip the animal.
skip the animal. Yeah, what we always say, you know, if you think about it economically and in total business models, what you say is you can transform a total value chain if you basically cut out the middleman. We often say that. Well, this time it's the chicken, because you don't need to go from plant into chicken, from chicken into humans, but you can actually go direct. And the food waste which there is, to be able to have it in an indirect step, both because the chicken is the most inefficient factory you can have, because there's basically only 20% of the yield of protein which comes out. And so therefore there's food waste in that system. And of course there is an impact which is very negative. What I never knew actually, which is was a complete revelation for me, is that if you think about the total plant-based food system, people think only for alternative meat is that it could be like 450 billion euros of size by 2040. And that is 3 times the global beer market. If and when we do that, and you plant that, you can do that with planted physical land use of only 3% of the globe. And that 3% with the positive impact on the carbon which it will have, will actually change the total climate change with a full degree. And so that is, you know, a complete new system, which actually for the consumer, there's no compromise, and obviously all the benefits which it will entail.
So what about when people say, well, you're missing all the micronutrients and the vitamin B12 and the different things that animal foods have brought us?
Of course. And I think let's start by saying is that many of these discussions are, you know, nuanced discussions. So I never think it is, you know, a polarizing part of the discussion. So the first point is that this is, especially around plant-based food industry, is a young industry. If you go 10 years ago, basically the general population said is that the taste was just not good enough. What you see is that through the food technology, you see now is that people say, yes, we are in a zone where people say it looks like, feels like, and tastes like chicken, and there's no compromise or, you know, sort of it's good enough. So that's the most important thing. That's the biggest unlock for scale for the plant-based food system. The second one is, as I said, it is in the early part of its development. And so elements such as, you know, how do we continue to increase the elements of the nutrients is already on a good platform, but we can improve that. Take B12 as a good example. If you go to a total vegan lifestyle, the key thing that you miss is obviously B12. And so you can choose, you know, to take supplement around that. But it is more important for us as a total plant-based industry to say how can we actually take that into, you know, the next generation of our product development. And that's where innovation will come in. So so the 2 parts is, one, it's early development of the industry. The second one is the current part is already both in taste and in nutrition, really where we say ready for real quick and broad adoption.
So we were talking about a little bit earlier, South Africa, for example, becoming a plant-forward or a potentially completely plant-based nation. What would a day look like? What if I'm going to go shopping or you're going to go shopping? How are we going to do that in this world? What are we going to buy?
Yeah, you know, I think it obviously needs a broad portfolio of products. And so both the dairy transformation and the meat transformation are the main parts of it. We as the Live Kindly Collective, we are focusing first now on the meat part of it. And so if you think about it, whether it is from chicken, whether it is on pork, or whether it is on red meat, all these elements, you know, you really can have that as a substitute. What is important is that you go to these countries, and there in these countries, on average, consumers only take and use 10 recipes in a year. And so that is an insight when you think about, all of our behavior. We all have our family favorites. And when you basically think about the family favorites and you look at that and you take the animal-based part of that family favorite and you just change one thing, you change that animal part into plant-based. And so whatever it is in South Africa, but if you just change then the chicken into plant-based chicken, that in itself, makes the big difference.
So the plate, I'm thinking of just a typical plate, let's say, South African, the most basic I can think of. You'd have mieliemeal pap, you'd have boerewors, and you might have something green.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's going to be mieliemeal pap, something green, and then...
And then plant-based boerewors.
Grown in South Africa?
Yeah, and so the big thing there is that if you think about, the protein transformation and take South Africa as an example. So the first current reality is that many parts of the world, South Africa being a good example, the consumers, the people actually have low or no protein. And like the mobile industry, what will happen is, they go to middle class and then to upper class. And that means it's from no to low protein. They go into eating of meat and then into plant-based.
Because it's a status symbol and people feel their children are going to benefit.
Exactly. And so that is just the normal evolution of what is happening. What we will try to do is the same as the digital transformation, where it went from no to a low penetration of phone, not through landline into mobile phone, but actually you get the leapfrog. And so like the digital leapfrog, we want to have the protein leapfrog here. So what will happen? We are planting yellow pea seeds in South Africa. And, when you go to South Africa, lots of this is monoculture plants, whether that's sugarcane or many others. And what you see is that because of that, is that the soil starts to become so unhealthy, is that it will become almost a desert. And so what we do is you plant yellow pea seeds and you crop rotate that with other plant-based, which basically means is that you get carbon positive back into the soil. And so
you're fixing the soil.
So you fix in the soil, then you get healthy, affordable protein for the people. So
in the supermarket?
In the supermarket. So you're fixing the health of the nation. And then the third big thing what you can do in countries like that is that if you do this at a scale of planting the plant-based ingredients, they can become, instead of a net importer of food, they can become a net exporter of food. And so that is basically the big transformation in countries like South Africa, what you can have, fixing the soil, taking the animal out of the food system, having at the same time a healthier population as the people of South Africa. And the third one, having a healthier economy, because suddenly...
interest on the economy side, do you think countries still need to think about becoming exporters? So we were talking earlier about, distance and supply chains and all the different things that we've suddenly have been uncovered, whether it was the evergreen or the length of our supply chains, the fragility. In fact, many of the food supply chains held up well during the pandemic, I think. But do we need to still think about this export imperative?
I think it's that we will get a balance of the two thoughts. The first reality is that in the food system, we need to have 4 or 5 real pivots. Animal to plant-based. Then we need to go from processed to natural ingredients. Then we need to go from global supply chains into affordable local supply chains. But it also needs to be affordable. And so when we get the balance, and I think is that the previous speakers started to talk about it, we need to get to true cost in the system, including the cost of, what the ecological footprint will be. But when you have true cost in the system, then it's okay to optimize the total system. But it has to be done also through the logic of true cost.
When do you think I or anyone in South Africa might be shopping for pea-based chicken? When will that be on the shelves?
It will actually very rapidly, because there is a restaurant chain in South Africa called Nandos, and they have very, very famous peri-peri chicken. And so, you know, that is one of the best thing there is in South Africa. And we are developing actually under one of our brands, which is the Oomph brand, Oomph peri-peri plant-based chicken with yellow peas as their ingredient. And then you get the benefit of all, because as we said, you know, you get a positive carbon footprint, and you know, you get something which they love because it's a local dish. And it's a very good example is that you change only one thing. Everything stays the same, but you change from peri-peri chicken to peri-peri plant-based chicken, and that is why and how you get it in a penetration, that you get it broad-based into the country.
And when will that be?
That will be at the end of this year already.
This year?
Yeah, that will be.
Is there any way you might talk to Nandos and say, would you like to?
Well, we are talking to Nandos already for 9 months. And so they are very happy to do exactly that. So these are the things which we are doing. And you know, what we do in South Africa as well, as what your previous example was on boerenworst. And so boerenworst is a typical South African dish. And there again, you can, we have just launched a plant-based boerenworst. But we don't only do that in South Africa, but we also do it in the US, we do it in Germany, we do it in China. And the big difference is that it is, you know, the top dish in America is a burger. So then you take a burger and you change that into a plant-based burger. In China, that's a dumpling. So you take a dumpling with pork and you change that into a dumpling with plant-based pork. And if and when we do that, you know, that will be a much bigger way to transform the current food system into a plant-based food system, because you actually transform the critical part, but you also keep intact the habits what consumers really enjoy.
So one of the things we also touched on earlier was when we were just coming back from lunch. So when I buy or use, you know, if someone goes into a butcher, you might get something wrapped up in a piece of paper, which is kind of now considered very, I don't think we thought about it when things used to be wrapped up in paper. We just thought that was what it was. But when I go into a supermarket, I tend to buy things, especially plant-based things, in plastic. So how are you looking at that? How are you looking at packaging?
Yeah, packaging is also one of those industries which completely need to change. And again, in line with the previous speakers, when it was put in place, you know, plastic was there to be able to not get food waste and to be able to have enough food for people around the world. Obviously, you know, at the scale and the way is that the plastic industry has evolved, this has become more harmful than, you know, the intent it was. And so these unintended consequences we need to get out of the system. What you see is, you know, on packaging, 100% recycled, and whether that is in mechanical or chemical recycling. And so you can have already the total closed loop system also on packaging. We have one of our brands is the Like Meat brand, and this is called PCR, a post-consumer response recycled product. And that is the way to do and to take that also into account. So as what we were talking, you know, you need to think about what are the pivot points of a total industry, not only changing one dimension of it, but actually changing all the critical elements of it.
Which is huge, which is lucky that you have experience with supply chains and all the different elements of them. So have you, in terms of packaging, if the chicken is about to be available to consumers, it will be in this packaging?
Yeah.
And how will consumers know what to, I mean, I tend to buy coffee these days because I don't choose my bean or anything like that. I just look for something that is in a compostable package since I discovered it. I'd never seen it before, and now it was there, and now it seems to have disappeared again. So how will people know that's what they're buying?
Yeah, you know, at the end, consumers are very intuitive. And there is a plant-based brand in America, which is actually called No Evil. You look at that packaging and you really see, you know, that this is a really recycled packaging part. And so again, you know, we just need to make sure is that all these elements are very clear and intuitive for the consumer. The word plant-based food is actually one of the best things what has happened in the industry, because everybody who hears that word actually intuitively believes, and we need to do the same with packaging.
Interesting. Okay, so what do you feel businesses and corporations should be doing? So clearly you know what you're doing, you know what Unilever does and has done. Anyone else, what should they be doing? What do you advise?
You know, the advice is to go back to why business exists in the first place, and that is to serve society. And so every part of business should actually think about what the purpose is of their existence. What you see more and more, and that is why the next 10 years of business will be so incredibly critical, is that what we see more and more is that business starts to realize is that actually purpose, performance, relevance, and therefore growth are linked. And you see it for the first time actually in the financial markets really coming, is that people start to truly invest with a premium in terms of businesses which we call ESG companies, which have at the core of their business
Environment, social and government.
exactly
ESG.
ESG investing. And you know, Nestle 2 months ago did an incredible statement on that. They've said is that they put 3.2 billion Swiss francs, actually take that out of dividends and use that to be able to invest so that they can help and change their total business into net positive. And so when we start to see is that investors, this time it's the Nestle investor or the general market on ESG investment, they start to really realize is that actually performance, relevance and growth and purpose start to become one and the same thing.
Just wondering, did that happen? I can't remember the timeline. There was some documents that were leaked from Nestle that said, well, we kind of accept that our food isn't really food. You know, a lot of our food isn't.
No, so again, you know, if you look at all these big legacy companies, they need to really take the legacy company and move it forward to a next stage. And so there are lots of things is actually good progress. And so if they do it, they run it well, they put very clearly and say, this is what we define as good. And then you measure against that progress.
Okay.
Always these things are not fast enough. Having said that, the real innovators will come from the startup to scale up to global multinational. And the reason why is that like a company like ours, LiveKindly Collective, we don't deal with the legacy issue. And therefore you, from the beginning, you can get it really right in terms of how you set it up, in the values of the company, in the purpose of the business, and how you really create the real scale around it.
Quite honestly though, how many multi-billion-dollar or even million-dollar companies do you think are really going to take that on board?
I believe is that in the 10 years to come, food companies, I believe is that it is either they really make themselves irrelevant, or irrelevant, or they actually transform. And I think is that the consumer are always here, who are the boss. And the next generation, which is the millennials and the Gen Z, you already see it. You know, transparency is critical through the digital world. And they really demand it. And they start to choose and make sure is that the brands which they choose are those who are aligned to their values. And this is the generation where you see that tip. And so any business who doesn't really understand that will over time make themselves really, really irrelevant. And the financial market has started to really understand that as well.
And many businesses may do both. You know, people like Tyson are buying into plant-based foods and things like that. So is that a concern for you in the sense that businesses could see, okay, we can be both. We can be all things to all people, or would that delay a transformation?
No,
the kind of transformation you're talking about.
For us, everybody who pushes the agenda to go from an animal to a plant-based food system is good. And so whether that is the Unilevers, the Nestles, the Tysons, the Cargills, or the Impossibles or the Beyonds. Or why? Because the current food system is so sizable, is that it needs to be global enough to transform it, and it needs to be sizable to transform it. So we actually are partnering ourselves with partners like PHW, who is a chicken company in Germany, or RCL Foods, which is a chicken company in South Africa. And we do that because they want to transform. And it is better to help to transform an incumbent rather than, to be a niche disruptor. But we only do that with those who have a very clear vision that they want to actually stop killing animals, because that is ultimately what we need to get out. We need to get the animal out of the food system.
Do you feel they're doing that for welfare reasons, for profit reasons, for ESG reasons?
For all of the above, and that is the good thing about this. This is not about, for what reason do we do it? Because the consumer really moves fast into this area. They do it for just good business reasons. They also do it because ultimately, many of these CEOs and these people, they really, their daughters and their children, they actually say, what are you doing? What are you individually leaving as a legacy for us as the next generation? One of the most frightening things is obviously that in 2020, on August 22nd, we had eaten up, all of the carbon of this planet. So from August 22nd all the way to December 31st, we have eaten up the planet from our children and our grandchildren. We consumed the budget, and so these children are obviously saying to the current establishment, what are you doing? Do you really care? And that is, where business leaders have the ability and have the opportunity to really change the total system, because that is what our responsibility is.
So that's the business side. Now, what do you feel governments should or could or both be doing?
Yeah, I think, ultimately you see as a lag effect often from government behind, first the consumer and business. The bigger thing the government should, in my view, do is very rapidly put true cost into the system. And that is...
Can you just explain that?
If you look at the current reality on the animal-based food system, it's obviously a disgrace is that there are still subsidies in that, and therefore you get lower cost for the total system. Whilst at the same time, if you look at the plant-based food system, you actually get carbon positive, which means is that you will get carbon credits in the system. So we need to do both. We need to stop the subsidies into industries which actually have a negative impact. That's just absolutely unacceptable. At the same time, we need to start to recognize the positive carbon of the total chain. And these carbon credits, we need to put that into the total financing and monetizing of the system. When you do that properly, you will see is that a plant-based chicken will be around, if you take real true cost, the total plant-based chicken versus animal-based chicken will be half the cost. And so if that happens...
Half the cost of the normal...
Of the normal animal-based chicken. By the way, that's not normal, but you see that our logic is still that we think that that's normal. But the point is that the animal-based is actually the double... The in real cost is double the cost of plant-based. And if that happens, you will see a total shift in the scale, because it's not only about better protein, but now it is also about more affordable protein. And just think about what that will do.
How close do you think that is?
In life, we have experienced in the last 10 years is that there has been only exponential growth. And COVID, as difficult as it has been on a health level, it has accelerated basically many of these trends, whether it was a digitization of the world or the consciousness of the world. And so you see these accelerators are coming in increasingly the case. Digital in itself is always an exponential growth part of it. So to answer the question very specifically, between now and the end of this decennium, when we basically look at our United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we should be in a place.
By 2030?
Exactly. By 2030, we should be in a place is that we have that equation. But as where we started this part of the question, governments need to act. The good thing is that many governments have started to put their intents in there, whether that is, in Europe or whether it is in the US. Luckily, Biden is in there, and he's obviously committed back to the Paris Agreement. China has said zero by 2050. And so all of them, they need to not only have these statements, but they need to do something. In the 5-year plan of China, there's already a green economy as one of the legs in the 5-year plan of China. That means is that, they need to support an industry to do that. And the best and easiest way to do that is to take the subsidies out of the animal-based food system and recognize the carbon credits in a plant-based food system.
I'm smiling slightly because I think the last picture I saw of a pig farm in China was one of those multi-story pig farms that are being financed by people, international finance. So whether it's the IFC or the World Bank, and those are massive structures. I cannot imagine someone dismantling that anytime soon.
Yeah, China is always an interesting system, and so we take the many elements which we don't agree with, obviously out of that system, but also look at what an incredible change that system has created. Look at the fact is that how many people went out of poverty in the last 20 years. Look at the fact what they are now doing in terms of renewable energy. And so it's a polarizing reality still. They have the opportunity to really make and create the biggest plant-based food system. Pork is absolutely at the lowest stock ever. They're always worried in China about food security. And this is their way to be able to really get and solve their food security. At the same time, they have the ability to really get to their targets, and that is to get to net zero by 2050.
So I can see questions coming in here at some point, but I'm just going to finish. So we've talked about business, we've talked about governments, consumers. Do you have any sort of advice, just daily advice for consumers? What to look for, what to do, how to think about this?
I think I love Sophie Kevany, who wrote this book, OMD, 1 meal a day, plant-based, and you can make the biggest impact there is. And if we all have that in our minds, and so whether you are 6-7 days plant-based, or whether you're 1 day plant-based, you make a difference. You make a real impact. Of the filmmaker. Of James Cameron.
James Cameron. Thank you. Yeah, I thought it was the same.
And by the way, James Cameron is an incredible environmentalist, and so they are very passionate about this. And so this is the first thing, and that is the OMD, 1 meal a day plant-based, and you make a difference. The second one is listen to the next generation, especially to the daughters of the next generation. They intuitively always come home and say to their parents, I just don't want to eat animals anymore. And in Holland, we have this beautiful book which has a title, Ooit aten we dieren. There was a time is that we were used to eat animals. And I think is that what we need to really start to realize is that we question current logic and current systems. Like we questioned the slavery system, which was abolished in 1888 in Brazil. And so we now look at that and said, what were we thinking? Well, that is exactly the way that we will look at this. And we just need to question. And the consciousness of the COVID reality will help to be able to continue to ask these fundamental questions of current systems, instead of just out of habit, stay in the current system.
So I think one of the things you're working on now is a set of cartoons, animations.
Right.
Do you want to talk a bit about that?
What we have learned in 27 years of fast-moving consumer goods is that there's many ways to be able to communicate with consumers. And so the first thing is that brands actually communicate to consumers. And we do that with Fry's family, with family favorite dishes. We do it with Like Meat, and to say that barbecue, which is such a social part, we can make that plant-based. And so there's different brands who communicate in different ways. But as a Live Kindly collective, what we said, there also needs to be a total voice of the movement. And we have a website which is livekindly.com, which basically talks and inspires people to basically have a plant-based lifestyle. What we've now launched is just 3 very unique cartoons, again to just make people aware of the fact of what the current system is. And these elements, when you can make it in social media, when you can make it talkable, it's, even if we just touch one person on that and say, wow, I haven't thought about it that way.
So I think it's a pig, a sheep.
A pig, yeah, a sheep, and a cow.
Oh,
yeah,
a cow,
and a chicken, actually. And the chicken one, I don't know whether we have it, but maybe it's nice to show it if we have the cartoon on the chicken. There it is.
Oh, which do we? I don't know if we know his name. Ernie.
Can we go a little bit back? Is that possible? Yeah.
I'll let them get on with that technical part. And then I wanted to ask, because I think we better switch to questions soon. So your thoughts about the now, so there was this row in the EU about whether we could use the word plant-based milk or hamburger or any of that. So it seems to have all died away, but there's plenty of pushback from, the livestock industry, from all of the people around the livestock industry. 2 questions there. Do you worry about those kind of debates about words, which seem so small, but it's potentially huge? And do you worry about climate misinformation in relation to livestock?
Yeah, the first one is we really worry about that, because for consumers, actually, these descriptors are absolutely critical. And, if we look back in terms of the food technology, if it is too much on the technology side, consumers actually see it as Frankenstein food and they reject it completely.
Lab meat or...
Even if they don't have any idea, but intuitively it's not in the right place. So descriptors, plant-based food is a beautiful descriptor. People just love it, even if they don't really understand it. And so descriptors are key. That we have in terms of alternative meat, plant-based meat, is that we got on the right side of this was good. That it was on the dairy side shows is that how much incredible lobbying is still happening, which is definitely a big concern. Also, the cost of lobbying is absolutely ridiculous. Talk about real cost again. So I think that's the first point. The second point is that we actually, as the plant-based food system, also need to talk holistic enough. So not only about the land, but also about the ocean. We can talk about the Dutch wheat burger, where you actually you take your protein from seaweed, which is one of the fastest growing plants in the world. And when you cut it, you get versatility in the ocean. And so the versatility and the differentiation and the diversification of the plant-based feedstock is absolutely critical, whether that is yellow peas or organic soy, or whether that is the seaweed, or whether it is fava beans or lupine, and all of that is critically important in there. And therefore, descriptors around that feedstock is very, very critical. So to your earlier question on governments, true cost and making sure is that the descriptors are clear for consumers, and it enables the transformation to a better food system.
And then do you hear much misinformation around lives? I mean, I've seen documents, that talk about livestock and the role in saving the planet.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, looking at some recent data, so we might by 2030 have about 80 million food animals on the planet. Now, I think we need to be heading towards 40, but we're not.
Yeah. No, look, I think is that the worst has happened in this reality is, the issue about half facts. And I think, if there's one negative issue around the digitization of the world, is that, you see so many real confusion about that. And, ultimately there is something there for governments to make sure is that we get the standards right and that we do that on the right way to communicate it in a very simple and easy way. consumers, needs lots of guidance. They're worried about, their children going to school, school fees, health, all kinds of broader things. And so therefore, on this part, it should not be like you need to do a whole study. It needs to be simple and communication in a very consistent way.
Okay, and then one in your own personal and business life, is there something, what's your proudest achievement up to now, or is that still in the future?
Look, I hope, Iris, that I've done 50 years on this side, and I am keen to do 50 years on my second innings, and really taking all of my experience, expertise, and put that at service to society. So I hope that will be the biggest impact. We have 5 daughters. The first one is an adopted Zulu daughter, and we have then 4, so 5 in total. And the one who is the most clear about this is the youngest, and it talks about it, and she absolutely says, Daddy, I'm vegan, and she is so absolutely adamant around it. And that's the proud part of getting this generation really into the consciousness, and that will be the biggest exponential accelerator which will happen.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to look at a couple of questions now. So we have a question from Lebanon. Do you think you can start to consider, I don't know if you've thought of this, but creating plant-based food for dogs?
No, it's obvious. And it is happening already because, this is the good thing about, where economic systems will drive innovation and for the better. Ultimately, if we get, but this is a little bit a longer term logic, ultimately, the current dog food and pet food obviously goes as a byproduct of the animal-based food system. So ultimately, if we take the animal out of our food system, we also don't have pet food anymore to make, and therefore, plant-based pet food will be there. We will not wait for that. If you look at many of them, whether that's the master foods, the Mars of this world, or the Nestle's of this world, this is a very, very easy part. And again, all that helps if you do, meat, dairy, pet food, condiments. When the whole trend is there, it becomes part of the total system, and that's even better.
And just interesting that question is coming in from Lebanon, because clearly a country like that, they have, a lot of daily challenges, and other countries as well. But in a country like that, do you think it's even possible to think beyond the daily challenges to say, oh, I need to, go 1 meal a day? Is that even, do you have any advice for someone who's in a difficult situation, in a country that's in a difficult situation?
Ultimately it is about personal health, and what we need to do is get the affordability up very rapidly. But even it is better to invest in a way to buy products with higher nutrition and protein rather than cheaper. Cheap food often is the worst nutritional food there is, and so people do believe is that therefore it's a better deal. But ultimately, it's better to buy less, but buy actually better. And
so you're saying buy less animal protein, but better, and supplement the rest.
Supplement, exactly.
With plants.
With plants.
Okay. Do you have any favorite recipe you want to share?
in Lebanon, I don't have the top dish in my mind, but there's,
What's your go-to, when you're hungry and you need to cook something quickly?
Personally for me, for me it's chicken curry, and so chicken. Using plant-based chicken, like meat, plant-based chicken, and again, if you do that properly, you really get there's no difference. You cannot taste the difference. It's absolutely the structure, the texture, the taste, everything. You do that, and that is my and our top dish, which is very easy to change.
Okay, I'm going to take another question now. Why would Rabobank believe in investing in plant-based protein? So are Rabobank
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. Actually, Rabobank has invested in.
I should just explain Rabobank is a Dutch bank.
Yeah, I will help there. So it's a Dutch bank. As a legacy, it has been always part of the animal-based food system. In Dutch, it's called a cooperative. So basically, their shareholders are obviously the farmers at the same time. And so this is something where they need to choose to become part of the solution. And actually, you know, we need to help farmers to really transform their system. And very, very difficult, but I believe is that Rabobank and Wiebe Draaier is a very good leader in that sense, as a courageous leader, where he says, you know, we need to help the current system, but actually make sure is that we transform it into the next system. They invested into Oatly, they invested in the food in LiveKindly collective, and they really are very clear is that we have to get into the protein transformation. And so they do it because they realize that it is the only option.
Okay, and do you feel when you're talking about helping farmers, is that helping them financially, helping them reskill? What's...
Yeah, it starts with reskilling, but actually before that, there is something about, you know, helping to get into more of the vision of what it can become. And so if you have taken the farm of your father, and you know that is the way is that you've made and you can live together with your family, to be able to change that from an animal to a plant-based farm is obviously, you know, you need to bridge, you have 3 years of change, you need to reskill and refinance. And so that is the big thing. What will happen also is that you need to start to measure more to be able to get into these carbon credits. And that is again where the Rabobank can help.
What would you be measuring?
You measure the versatility of the soil.
Of your own soil, of your own farm.
Yeah, and so if you have too many cows on a farm, it becomes absolutely 100% a farm where nothing lives anymore. So it is dead ground, complete dead ground. Yeah, and for the cows ready to be slaughtered. And so the ground is already dead. The cow is about to become to be slaughtered. If you actually change that and you put seeds in there, you will see, and the farmers where we have changed it now, they call it green gold. It literally, you can see a complete new reality. And that green gold, you get carbon credits in there. And the Rabobank, actually under the leadership of Barbara Baarsma, she is actually leading the carbon bank for the Rabobank. And so that helps then to be able to get an additional profit stream in the total value chain, which is good for farmers because we need to get, you know, like what we have always say, we need to get the right profit in the right area of the total value chain.
So what will happen to those carbon credits once the farmer has kind of logged them?
So first you measure them.
Measure them.
Yeah, and then, you know, the farmer can start to sell not only the yellow peas, but also the yellow peas plus the carbon credits.
Like an offset?
No, it's not it's an offset for those who buy it.
Who buy it.
But actually it is, basically it's an income for those who sell it, for the farmer.
So you have two income streams. You have the peas and the carbon.
Exactly. And then you have a third one if you have the proper part of government, because they will actually subsidize this and stop subsidizing the harmful one. And so that is actually why in this total value chain is that for the farmer there is a real future. And you know where they come from, they need to change that. So this is a very big thing of how you transform current farmers. If you start new, yeah, you don't have your legacy issue, you can start immediately. And that's what we did in South Africa on a sugarcane farm. And so sugar, obviously, market goes down. People have too much land on sugarcane anyway. and it actually is very bad for the quality of the soil. And so therefore you get a double transformation. You get the sugar out, and you get a real diversification and versatile soil.
So this is the transformation of the land growing peas.
Literally what it is.
Yeah. Okay. So I have another question now. This is a tricky one. What do you think of lab meat? So by lab meat, we mean cell-based, fermented, cultured. It's got a lot of names.
So personally, I must say is that anything which helps to transform a current broken food system to a next generation food system where we take the animal out of the food system is positive for me.
Which is
so that is whether that's plant-based or whether it is cell-based. Yeah, so that's the first point. I personally believe is that it is good to do plant-based rather than cell-based, because in cell-based you take the negative out of the system, i.e. The animal-based food system.
The whole animal. You just take the cell.
Yeah, exactly, because you take the cell. But so therefore, the negative impact of plant or of animal-based food system you take out, right? Because you only take the cell. So you don't have, you stop the deforestation, you stop all the issues around animal-based food system. But you don't get the positive of the plant-based food system, and that is what we've just been talking about, the carbon positive part of growing plants, whether that's in the ocean or whether that's in the land. Because
so you don't necessarily see farmers, well, maybe it's both. I mean, you were describing in South Africa, they're replanting the peas, turning it into green gold.
Yeah.
And perhaps the farmer next door might have a fermentation, a brewery, a meat brewery.
Could be. And so, but the first one will have and the benefit of the animal-based food system out, and has the positive of the plant-based food system in. So you get a double pivot. Is cell-based, you only get one.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to another question. I'm just checking the time. Okay. What should politicians do? So this is a question from Bosnia. What advice would you give to governments? I think we did touch on this a little bit, but if you were specifically talking to, say, a government in Bosnia.
Ooh, no. The first thing is really recognize what the current opportunity is for a next generation of industries to develop. And I think we are planting, for example, in Serbia, we are planting yellow peas, organic soy, and so this is a new industry. When you talk to farmers, what was interesting, when you talk to them and you say, have you never heard about yellow peas and the benefit of that? And they said, yes, of course we have. We know, is that it is heat resistant. It is actually a very, very good quality and easy to farm. But they never did it. And so the obvious question, why not? And then the answer is that there was never a market for it. Now that there becomes a consumer demand for plant-based feedstock, suddenly it's there. And so if you are in Serbia, suddenly, the climate gives you an opportunity to create a complete new industry, which is, interestingly enough, a very sizable industry. And so that would be my first answer to the government, to the politicians, and really look, where are the opportunities to help to create a system change and
just
and
to
help
go back to subsidies. Would you suggest subsidies for peas, for example?
Not needed. As long as you take out the subsidies, on the harmful industries like the dairy industry, and recognize and help to support carbon credits. That's the way to do it. Of course, if you want to take it from one side and invest it in another one, it obviously helps to accelerate. But even that is not needed. But stop putting subsidies there where it is harmful.
Okay, I won't ask you about the new cap right now, but I will. I don't have another. Do we have another question coming up? No? I'm going to ask about insects, because I'm really interested in insects. So I know you can buy pet food made of insects, for example. How do you feel about insects as food for humans? Because I also understand that most insect food, in fact, will probably be destined to feed livestock and make them more, greener. Yeah,
so the first point is, if you really are very clear to take the animal out of the food system, you don't want to do that and replace it by eating insects. So that's the first point. The second one is, we need to think about what our consequence is by destabilizing nature. We have lived in Brazil. We've seen a lot about, what the destabilization of the Amazon has caused. And so we need to really recognize is that insects are just an inherent part of keeping the total system in balance.
So you wouldn't be...
No, I would not be a big...
not the silver bullet.
No, I think actually the power of plants is.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So I don't know is there any question I haven't asked you that you want, something that you want to talk about?
No, I think we talked about a lot of things. If there's one more thing to talk about, is basically you have relative small companies in the in the plant-based food system, which need to scale up rapidly, and you have those who have sizable businesses in terms of capacity and capability, and they actually need to understand better what plant-based food is about. And I believe is that these startups will go from startup to scale up to global multinationals, and I think is that the multinationals will get more into plant-based, and if that happens, from all sides, we will start to see a total transformation of food. In food, it is 14.5% of the total carbon footprint in the world is actually directly related to food. And so this is easy to change because it is just 1 meal a day to change, and the multiplier effect will make a very, very big impact. And that is obviously why we believe is that very passionately we can make a very big impact by making plant-based living the new norm.
Will we be able to buy shares one day in the... well, actually, that's a question too, vegan investing.
Yeah. No, we have, in 12 months, we got basically fundraised $535 million, which is the biggest ever in 12 months, biggest ever fundraise.
In the last 12 months?
In the last 12 months. It's the biggest ever fundraise in food in the world. And so that, that has a message in it. And that means is that, people really understand what this is all about and the necessity for it. So that's the first point. You see the same with Oatly. It went it just did its IPO, and it is absolutely amazing. 400 million revenue with a market cap of 14 billion. So again, what it sees is that people really understand the potential and the support for it. So this is not about the money. This is making sure is that we scale up the capacity and the capability of the industry quick enough so that we can serve society.
That is interesting. I'll certainly be watching the stocks there. Do we have any other questions? Should I wrap up? Are we... Oh, the video. We're going back to the video, of course. Your videos come.
Very
okay,
nice.
Thank you.
Ernie, a pig from New York, refused to end up on a fork. A stripe on his back helped save Ernie's neck, 'cause he was no longer pork. Florence's birthday was great fun. Her pink sneakers sparkled in the sun, but she ran out of luck when her dad saw a truck and shouted, "Run, Florence, run!" Her mother said, "I've grown way too big. You escape through this tunnel real quick. In this battery cage, life's only 42 days. Please, remember me, dear chick."
Thank you.
Thank you.
what you do.
Thank
Please
you.
join me.
Thank you very much.